old Parthem Empire was devastated by the Backlash. Just more than 100 years ago, the magical destruction ended mankind's golden age. Its magnificent cities gone, its mighty wizards and wise sages annihilated. Since the Backlash, life became cheap and peace hard to come by. The nether races came out from their wasteland hiding places and relentlessly raided and pillaged where and whenever they pleased. Civilization barely held on. Recently, however, there has been an unusual increase in the raiding activities of goblins and Krugen in our area. Increased guards and patrols maintain our borders, but the highly coordinated nature of the attacks betrays a deeper evil. The Oracle has determined that Raka, the stone giant responsible for the ignominious slaughter at Taris Null, has been organizing the various humanoid tribes and is succeeding in increasing his territory and sphere of power. To further exacerbate Raka's threat, he has managed to reactivate the castle Zephron, the ancient flying castle of the Elvish lords. We're concerned that if he is not dealt with swiftly, he will be able to coordinate an invasion that could upset the fragile stability of the kingdom. The Earth Rune is the key to neutralizing the castle, but its three parts are hidden in different locations in the Darkwood Forest. The heart is one of the three artifacts we will need to assemble the Earth Rune, which will allow us to regain control of Castle Zephron. The elves are good allies of ours, and have already agreed to lend us the heart for the purpose of defeating Raka. You will meet with a colleague of mine, an elf named Ansorin. We must reassemble the components of the Earth Rune, then use it to anchor the castle before Raka has time to cause more damage. Lomin the Just was renowned for his heroism and wise rulership during the Nether Wars, now long forgotten. Trained as a common soldier, he earned recognition time and again for his skill in battle and ability to lead men victoriously from near certain death. He distinguished himself by personally leading his kingdom's armies into battle against Magwar, the Minotaur King. Even though Magwar is an immortal freak, Lomin was able to cripple him and magically imprison him in a tower he had specially constructed to contain the monster. When he was still alive, Lomin was the guardian of the Stone of Balance, one of the three pieces of the Earth Rune. The stone is still resting in the inner sanctum of Lomin's abandoned keep, and can be retrieved by a hero who passes the test Lomin left behind to safeguard the artifact. Legend has it that whoever can defeat Magwar will be allowed access to the inner sanctum of the keep, where the Stone of Balance has resided these many years. As much as I respect your skills, I assure you that this is a task that you cannot accomplish without some aid. Lomin must have left some help for a worthy hero, and I am confident that you will be able to surpass his test. Return with this needed artifact, that we may continue our march towards eliminating the threat of Raka and securing your father's lands. Dusk Lake. The place is a monument to the kind of arrogance that caused the collapse of the old empire. The lake has always been home to strong magics. Even the primitive tribe that used to live near its shores could feel the intense lines of force and magical nodes that interweave throughout the area. They built monuments here and buried their dead in ornate burial mounds nearby, for they knew that this was an important place. Before the Backlash, a wizard named Alana chose this site for her residence so that she could take advantage of all the freely available power. She chased the tribe away and had a triple-spired tower built out in the middle of the lake, right on top of the strongest magical node. Elemental fire energy was easy to access from this location, and she used it to perfect powerful fire-based spells. In recognition of her importance, she was made the keeper of the Eternal Flame, one of the ancient artifacts given to the races of good at the very beginning of the world. Over time, she became increasingly ambitious and summoned fiery creatures into our world to do her bidding. The arrangement was most dangerous and unstable, and when the backlash hit, her home was turned into a playground for all the unnatural beasts she had brought here. They cannot stray far from the spires, but the entire structure is rife with the beasts. It is there that you must go in order to retrieve the Eternal Flame. Even in death, Alana clings to her lust for power. She has transformed into a lich, a powerful undead monster. And while she's not as strong as she was when she was alive, she is still a formidable opponent. Defeat her and bring back the flame, and we shall be one step closer to defeating Raka. War is an ancient art, as old as the land itself. From the very beginning of their creation, the Ephegai and Turpai found themselves in constant conflict with one another. While the Turpai were superior warriors, the Ephegai were able to use their scientific bent to construct magical defenses in order to ensure their own survival. Many of these relics are lost forever, buried in the rubble of history. Some, however, survive still to this day. Very often, the true nature of the relic has been forgotten or is shrouded by myth and legend. The beacon at Asengath is one such structure. Built by the Ephegai ancestors of the elves, it was intended as a communication and control center for their flying castles. A town grew around the beacon, inhabited by the Ephegai, who operated this center of their defenses. Today, the elves who live in Asengath think of the beacon as a sacred site, a symbol of their ancestry. Only a handful of scholars know the true history of the place. The beacon fell into disuse after the Great Truce between Ephegai and Turpai, a momentous event that heralded many generations of peace in the world. After it became apparent that the truce would hold, the control key to the beacon, known as the Earth Rune, was disassembled into its component parts and given to trusted Ephegai leaders for safekeeping. Over the centuries, these three artifacts became status symbols, emblematic of the Keeper's position of power. The pieces changed hands many times over and were never again assembled into the Earth Rune. Until now. I will send you with the rune to Asengath. You will need to assemble the three staves that guard entry into the beacon. Each staff will allow you to open one of the domed buildings, which in turn will allow you to remove one of the three magical barriers around the beacon. Each staff will be with some important resident of Asengath. We have heard reports that Raka has sent his minions out to terrorize the town and garrison it against us. Evidently, Raka somehow knows of the importance of the beacon. Keep your wits about you and return quickly. There is still much work to be done. Zephyron is a magnificent castle, a marvel to behold. It is able to travel high above the clouds and was used in the old days by its elven makers to help protect civilization from the barbarians and warmongers. During the siege of Falfar City, the invaders dispersed in terror at the very sight of Zephyron coming over the horizon. It was a true wonder, a shining example of how the ancient technologies could be used for good. But alas, now as you've seen, it's being used by Raka for all manner of atrocity. The splendid halls of Zephyron are being defiled by the very presence of him and his army of vile fiends. We simply cannot allow them to continue to occupy this great castle. Even now, Raka's minions are trying their best to break the magical anchor that you've locked onto the castle. They have gotten their filthy hands on Lord Yurg's spirit turbine, used by the mad Yurg during the Dark Inquisition. Raka's henchmen are using the turbine to drain the living souls from captive creatures in order to gain enough energy to escape the tether. Given enough time, they will eventually break free. Raka's army is too large for us to hope to retake the castle by force, but we may be able to sabotage Zephyron and wipe out the Horde. Unfortunately, this will involve the destruction of this wondrous structure, but we seem to have little choice. I have enchanted this gem, and it is the key to neutralizing the castle. In the power core room, you will find a small receptacle that leads to the castle's power source. Putting this gem in that receptacle will drain the castle of its power and eventually bring it crashing down to Earth. Zephyron will have enough reserve energy to stay aloft for a short time, but will soon turn into a mangled pile of rubble. As soon as the gem has taken effect, the castle will probably start to become unstable. So be careful, but be sure to get back to the entry node in time. While you have toiled to eliminate Raka, an inhuman army was on the move. The invaders are massive, red, scaly beasts that walk about like men, but have heads like dragons. They call themselves the Draconus. Your father has dedicated all his forces to opposing this horde, but it seems the best we can hope for in armed conflict is to delay inevitable defeat. The Oracle tells us that ancient prophecy outlines a possible way out of our dire situation. Ages ago, the Inubians held off Garn the Invader and his armies for an entire summer. It is said that prior to the onset of winter, Garn unleashed a magically created beast, a juggernaut, that fought with the power of thousands of men. If we manage to build a juggernaut like Garn's in time, we have hope for holding the invaders at bay. The pieces we need are all to be found in the ruins of the home province of the old empire. The Rivian Order was a select group of knights who dedicated themselves to protecting the innocent and vanquishing the wicked. Treyarch was one of the last members of the Rivian Order, and its most noteworthy. Treyarch had a magical amulet that protected his life force from the ravaging effects of the undead horrors he had to cleave through while hunting down their masters. The Oracle sees that Treyarch's spirit remains inside the grounds of the Abbey, for his body has not yet been properly laid to rest. Go to the Abbey of the Rivian Order, for we need Treyarch's amulet in creating the Juggernaut. Its enchantment will animate it, bring it life. While you're there, you should help Treyarch finally rest in peace. Friar Nashan was one of the original founders of the Tiran League during the Old Empire. The League was a sect of warrior monks who lived in seclusion. They had a monastery in the Western Hills and were dedicated to improving themselves in a wide variety of disciplines. They strayed from their home only when a great need arose. During the Golden Age, a mad dwarf, Kolkath, led an army of his people from the Forged Mountains to invade the country surrounding the Western Hills. They had ruined the mother vein in their lands and were looking for new mines to plunder. The monks of the order fought at the forefront of the army that opposed Kolkath and his bloodthirsty dwarves. All of the monks, but Nashan, were brutally cut down. When Nashan saw the bodies of his brethren before him, he took his trusty mace and blessed it in the blood of his brothers. It is said that after rising from his ceremony, he went on to drive a path through scores of dwarves, straight to Kolkath himself. His vengeance was swift and mighty. It seems that the gods are smiling on our goals, for we would never dream of desecrating a burial site to recover an artifact. However, the Oracle has seen that the tomb of Nashan has been broken into recently. She sees that the mace is nearby, but may not be for long. Go investigate the tomb and return with the mace so that our Juggernaut may have a suitable weapon. When the backlash hit, Falfar City was left without its magical defenses for the first time in hundreds of years. The city fathers needed to devise a plan to produce a means of defending the city from the increasingly numerous raiders. The leaders of Falfar City settled on the shield wall. Fergus, a blacksmith and tinker, led the efforts. He had a genius for mechanical projects and designed the shield wall as an impenetrable barrier against all assailants. Because of this and similar efforts, Falfar City remained free and strong for decades after the backlash, a bastion of civility in an increasingly barbaric world. In fact, it was not intruders who destroyed Falfar City, but a massive flood. The flood was an aftershock of the backlash that devastated the city, killing its occupants and rendering it uninhabitable. Fergus was undertaking another ambitious project when the flood struck. He was trying to reanimate the golem that had protected the city before the backlash. It used to be powered by magic, but Fergus had been trying to refashion it with mechanical parts so that it could go back into service. He was working on a pneumatic heart for the Titan when the city was destroyed. Because of the alloys that Fergus used, the heart should still be in serviceable condition. Whatever is left of it will be of immeasurable value in constructing our Juggernaut. The main difficulty consists of getting to it, seeing as the majority of Falfar City is currently underwater. Find a way to open the shield wall. It should drain the water from the old city and allow you access down to where Fergus's workshop was. Bring back whatever remains of the heart, so that we may attempt to reconstruct Fergus's work. During the Golden Age, peace presided throughout the land. The benevolent rulership of the Emperor and rich understanding of magic and science allowed for unprecedented prosperity. Unfortunately, prosperity is never enough for some. Many magicians were tapping into forces beyond their control, trying to harness magical energies to further their own power and glory. Few saw the horror of the backlash approaching. Most of those who dared speak out against the unrestricted dabbling into various realms of magic were quickly labeled as reactionary and waved aside by respected society. One man's voice could not be easily dismissed, however, that of Margot Zanber. The first time Margot spoke out for limiting certain lines of research, the court, and soon the kingdom, was abuzz with the news that Margot, the man who was the paragon of modern ideals, had gone over to the doomsayers. Over time, he became a complete recluse, never straying from his tower. The backlash hit, just as Zanber had foretold, eradicating magicians in a massive wave and ravaging the very fabric of all but the most powerful magical nodes. Margot, however, managed to preserve a small bit of his essence. It is still in his tower, which has remained undisturbed all this time. You must venture there and return with the distillation of the Great Wizard's force, for it will give our Juggernaut the autonomy of thought it needs to be effective in battle. Crystals are strong foci for magical energy. Their use in the manipulation of magic goes as far back as anyone can recall. Each crystal type has increased potency for a particular type of magic. Sapphires are excellent enhancing agents for all manner of water magic, while diamonds are the preferred gem for cleansing spells. The larger and more perfect a crystal is, the more potent the magical energy drawn into focus. Hokum, a powerful mage before the Backlash, used a massive ruby the size of a man's fist to power the magical barrier that protected the city for so many generations. The Phoenix's tear, as it is known, is said to be the finest ruby ever seen in the kingdom. Apparently, during all of their activity in the area, the insectoid monsters uncovered the tear, and now the insect queen has it in her lair. This gem would make the perfect power focus for our Juggernaut. Recover the tear from the queen, for with it our Juggernaut will be complete, and we can begin the campaign to drive back the Draconus. The elves have located the queen's hive and are already underway in trying to restore the balance. Our companion Ansorin is there, and he will fill you in on the current situation. The Juggernaut is complete, and functions exactly as we had hoped it would. Lesser foes surely would have scattered at the very sight of such an ominous opponent, but not the Draconus. Their relentless resolve is utterly inhuman, and we think we have some idea as to why this is. Despite the fact that dragons have been extinct from this earth for centuries, there seems to be one residing high up in the mountains. The Draconus are its furiously loyal foot soldiers, and it has gained allies on this world as well. With its growing base of power, the dragon is certain to eventually succeed in its designs, if not swiftly dealt with. Your father's army and the Juggernaut can only stem the tide for a while. We're trying to find out more about the dragon and its base of operations. Meanwhile, there are missions important to the war effort that will occupy your attention. The Strong Pick clan is supplying the Draconus with arms. Like most dwarves, the Strong Picks are savvy when it comes to gadgetry. They have an elaborate machine, the Engine Colossus, which enables them to increase their productivity many times over. Without the engine, they cannot provide more than a trickle of supplies. We must destroy that engine. The destructive power of the potions we use to defeat the Insect Queen will be insufficient to ensure the sabotage of the engine. The dwarves, though, create massive explosions by supplementing similar potions with a secret catalyst. Discover the secret of the dwarven catalyst and obtain some of it. Then get to the engine room where you should mix the catalyst and the potions to create the explosion needed. The lizard men, just like humans, have a variety of different cultures. The group you encountered in the Cimmerian swamp is a fairly primitive example. They have, in more remote regions, evolved into much more advanced societies. These Socians, as they call themselves, are renowned for their scientific study, particularly in the realms of astronomy and associated magics. They're also a deeply spiritual people. Most of their beliefs center on the personification of the astral bodies into gods and goddesses. Their most revered is the sun god Sa, ruler of the pantheon. With the help of illusion, the Draconus Caliph has been posing as Sa to dupe the Socians into providing him with information and tributes. He has evidently been receiving payments from various Socian tribes for years now. This has caused a schism among the various Socian houses, as not all are convinced by Excalith's rules. The House of Zesson maintains the most zealous belief in the Wurm's deception and follows his creeds with unquestioned loyalty. This highly sophisticated house maintains many shrines to their various astral gods, and also acts as the keepers of the Atlas of Celestial Connections. We can use the Atlas and other records kept by the Zesson to investigate Excalith's motives further. In particular, the Atlas maps out the interconnections of various magical nodes in our own material world. As you know, our magics can only transport you to a known node portal, so a map of these would be of immeasurable value to use in our endeavors. The Oracle sees that you will need 3 runes in order to gain access to the Atlas and other records of the Zesson: the Sun Rune, the Moon Rune, and the Star Rune. These are usually kept in the different shrines that the house cares for. They will most likely resemble orbs or other shapes relating to the heavens. Obtain these 3 runes, gather as much information as you can, and return so that we may study them in hope of unraveling more of Excalith's mysteries. The dwarves are an entirely down-to-earth and level-headed race. Their calculating attitude toward the primacy of the survival of their society allows for no flights of fancy. By this account, it seems that the entire Strongpick clan has gone completely insane. While their arms production for the Wurm's armies has been severely crippled by the loss of the engine Colossus, they persist in helping the Draconus in any way they can. In fact, their latest endeavor is a campaign of terror against our towns and villages. They have modified a giant cannon, ordinarily used to blast chunks out of the mountainside for the mining of ores and coal. They are now using this tool to rain massive iron cannonballs down on the kingdom's settlements. This is having a seriously disruptive effect on our ability to supply your father's forces, and threatens to cripple their effectiveness in defending our borders. We need you to go back to Herfit's fort and sabotage this terror cannon. We've learned by studying crude plans acquired in earlier reconnaissance efforts that by simply pointing it straight up at the mountainside and firing it, the cannon can be made to destroy itself in a massive avalanche of stone. Unfortunately, many dwarves will also perish, but diplomacy has already run its course to no avail. It is very simply either the dwarves or us. The Zesson Atlas we recovered has been most enlightening. It tells us that Excalith first appeared to the Socians just more than 5 years ago, posing as the sun god Sa. At the same time, he was already taking over the minds and bodies of men in the outlying areas, turning them into Draconus that have been terrorizing our lands. It turns out the Draconus are magical creatures made from innocent humans. Excalith is bent on taking over our world, converting us all into his mindless servants, one by one. From the Atlas, we know where the earthly base of operations for Excalith and his mindless minions is located. They occupy a castle high in the Sisyphean range. This castle was unknown to mankind, but according to the Socian scrolls, was built hundreds of years ago by a dynasty of titans that has long since moved on. Within the Draconus castle is a magic portal that connects to an otherwise completely isolated location high in the mountains. The Atlas records this as the home of Sa. Also, the Oracle sees a portal there that connects to the dragon's home plane of existence. These clues can only mean that it is the place where Excalith himself hides from prying eyes. You must enter the Draconus castle and collect the 4 blood runes that will activate the portal. Then you shall be able to confront Excalith himself. Good luck, Dragonsbane. The next we meet, you shall have lived up to that title in its fullest sense.